without further ado, we intentionally designed this conference understanding what the last few years was like and the specialness of this event. And so we thought, this year, what if we focused intentionally on sending our people home with a sense of strength and resilience that they can bring back with them. And so we thought, who in our community have the skills to help us leave this space and to feel whole and well and feel loved and cared for by the community. And so, it became immediately apparent that Tina and Joan were the right folks to do this for us. Those of you that know this too know why we thought that would be a great idea. And if you went to their session, you also know that as well. So without further ado, two longtime CFHAers here to send us off in style. Tina, Joan, the floor is yours.
Great. Good afternoon. It's lovely to see everybody. I know it's a much smaller crowd and many people took their leave from Boise early, but we're glad that you all are here and are joining us. And if you are not sitting at a table that has green cards or party favors, maybe either make your way or steal some from a neighboring table, if you will. Do you want to introduce yourself? I think just get started. Okay. Okay. So, Naftali said that we're going to sort of help you feel kind of warm and whole and cared for, but probably we'll sort of take you maybe on a little bit of an emotional journey here as well. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, maybe 10 minutes or so. I usually ramble a little bit. Joan's going to talk a little bit, but we really want this to be participatory and have a community conversation and not just talk at you. So we're also going to ask you to have your phones, which probably everybody already does, and there may be some microphones that sort of find their way throughout the room as well. Okay. And a clicker. Where is the clicker? Thank you. Okay, so I have always loved this quote from Gandhi. I feel like it has been both a prescription in a way as also a guide really to kind of assess how I'm doing on my own dedication to being of service to others. But I found myself in about 2014 in a pretty different place, sort of after about 15 years of integrated care work. This is an excerpt from my journal. You don't have to read it up there. I'm just going to excerpt a part of it, which is, I've long embraced the truest version of the wounded healer. Some of you may be familiar with that myth of Chiron. My attempt to evade such an embodiment proved ill-fated long ago. And not only am I okay with that, it's good. It's the place of my best and most authentic, compassionate work. Technique holds nothing to a present, compassionate, and familiar ear and heart. But if I were truly working from this place, not only would I feel balanced and fulfilled, I might also feel full. It would not deplete me. It might even give me something back, some nourishment and renewal, some faith in the human spirit to endure and to heal and to grow. But for the past 6 months, this is lacking. Why? Perhaps it's other sorrows and demons knocking at my door, relentless in their demands to be let in, to be acknowledged. Perhaps it's the depth of trauma, of violence, of using the wrong tool for the problem that is so common among the patients we see. And like so many clinicians interested in well-being, I think my awakening to this was really personal. And this is not going to be a story about sort of my own recovery or morphing into the work that I do now, but I imagine many of you, either now, maybe, or in the past, or perhaps sometime in the future, may also find that your dedication to service work lands you in a place where you actually feel a little bit more lost than found. And it's common. And it's common because this work that we do, I think, really requires us to not only be at the margin and care for people with advocacy and with support of people at the margin, but actually to step into the margin, to actually inhabit a place where we are inseparable from people who are at the margin, and we take up residence in the margin ourselves. I think that is the truest, most authentic, most effective place to do service work. When we inhabit, as Susan Sontag says in her illness as a metaphor, she says, everyone who is born holds dual citizenship in the kingdom of the sick and the kingdom of the well. Although we prefer to use the good passport, sooner or later, each of us is obliged, at least for a spell, to identify ourselves as citizens of the other place. And this acknowledgement that we are both healers and need healing, to be of service, is really an unwelcome lesson for a lot of people. It is not something that is taught in schools. In fact, I think the culture of our medical education, of our behavioral health education, actually supports quite the opposite. It supports selfless service and sacrifice, and even, I think, at times, unhealthy altruism. So this idea that we're not the expert, that we may actually need something that's a little bit more tender and healing for ourselves in order to do this service work, is anathema to a lot of people who enter this profession. I got a text at 5:30 this morning from a patient that I see who said, these ICU nights are really terrible. I've worked lots of nights and days and shifting, and I've had 2 panic attacks throughout the night, and I don't think I'm cut out for this work. I don't think I'm cut out for this work. And it's like, no, we as humans are actually not cut out for that kind of sleep deprivation. We're not cut out to have our systems dysregulated in that way over time. This isn't a you problem. This is a culture problem. This is a system problem. You're doing just fine. And I also think, so if you've been at that place where you've doubted, or if that's yet to come, because it may come, and actually I think it's okay that it comes, that maybe when we do this work, if we are really sincere and earnest about our relationship to this work, we actually should meet that place that drops us to our knees a little bit and has us really question our relationship to work. That's not such a bad thing. That maybe you reach that place and hopefully you pause and you're willing to kind of see it for exactly what it is. We have such a desire to do the work that we do, whatever it is, whatever your profession is. And we have this pursuit, right? This really relentless pursuit to do it. And like any relationship, including your relationship with work, you should meet a place where you question because you have unmet expectations. Because it's not quite what you thought it was going to be or what you hoped it was going to be. And that's not a you problem. That's just a human experience when you're really dedicated to the path of this service work. So I think it's okay to have those times and to pause and reflect and to question. As the poet David White says, he says, a good day's work is often about making other people happy, and a good life's work is about making yourself happy. And so sometimes we have to pause and consider that. We have this charge to talk about sustainable work. I feel like we're a little bit preaching to the choir because you guys are here, sustain the conference, stay into the end plenary, and are also still doing this work. So maybe we should be talking to a different audience, but this is who we have. And I've been thinking a lot about clinician well-being for the last, probably for the last decade or so, but for the last 4 years, I've been working exclusively with caring for caregivers. And I see primarily physicians, all different specialties, all different stages of training. And so I'm caring for people who really are using that dual citizenship. They are using that second passport, where they are naming things that they experience in a system that negates their humanity, in a system that almost chastises them for trying to seek help and get help, and to figure out how to get rest and restoration, how to resource themselves. And that's really the source, that's really the birthplace from which I think, where I gain a lot of insights around what can be sustaining in this work. And delightfully, I find that if they can cross that threshold and come and seek care for themselves, almost always they're showing up in a way that is so much more compassionate for their own patients. They have their own rededication and recommitment to their work in a way that is just beautiful to see, in part because they're willing to be vulnerable and use that other passport. So those are the stories that really shape my understanding of how to make this work sustainable, which has to do with culture, right? It has to do with how do we get the healthcare ecosystem to really change. While I'm very much in support of making the EHR more efficient and streamlining prior authorizations and reducing regulatory clicks, all of those things, I actually don't think that's going to nudge the needle on clinician well-being and on sustainability in the workforce. I actually don't think those are the things that are going to do it. While important, they really aren't seeping down into culture change, into a culture that allows us to show up with our full humanity to do this work and to heal. And we need systems that not only prioritize recruitment, but prioritize retention. So what does it mean for something to be sustainable? And who bears that responsibility of sustainability? So I was recently reminded of the 3 types of symbiosis. I always thought symbiosis is sort of this mutually beneficial relationship between 2 organisms. Well, there's actually 3 types of symbiosis. One is the symbiosis of mutualism, where both parties really benefit from this relationship, right? So the coral reef and the algae have a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship. The clownfish and the sea anemone have a mutually beneficial relationship. One provides protection, and the other provides protection from enemies, from other predators. But there's also another type of symbiosis, which is called, I actually have a typo up there, communalism. So that's a type of symbiosis where it's beneficial to one party and neutral to the other. So the oxpeckers and the cattle are an example of this. The cattle kind of go along and they feed on the grass, and in doing so, they kick up a lot of bugs and insects and other things that are the food for the oxpecker bird. And so the oxpecker goes down and they eat all the insects and they get nourished. And then they're a very light bird, so then they just sort of hop up on the back of the cattle and they go to the next feeding place. It's very beneficial to the oxpecker and pretty neutral to the cattle. They don't really care, they just have a walking partner. And then you have the kind of symbiosis that is a parasite, right? A tapeworm is a good example of that. And some kinds of parasitism relationships actually result in the death of the host, and others are just maintaining it for the good of the parasite. So there are these different kinds of symbiotic relationships, and I will let you ponder what kind of symbiotic relationship you have with your organization. But at the meta level, I actually think we have a pretty parasitic relationship in terms of our healthcare ecosystem and our healthcare professionals. There is a power differential that's pretty undeniable. And when you have a workforce where 60% of the people are reporting burnout or an intention to reduce clinical care or leave practice, it's really hard to argue that it's anything other than a parasitic relationship. And clinical work will always have that sharp edge, but 60% of our population is at that level. There's something that's really wrong with the culture. So I think our system has really pretty blatantly exploited the naive, altruistic, and service-oriented younger versions of all of us. That we come into this work with a deep, deep desire to have purpose and meaning and to be of help and of service. And that can help us through a lot, actually. It can help us travel a lot of miles through arduous and expensive training. We can see our peers get married and buy houses and have kids while we're writing theses and dissertations, and then we can be really happy about landing an internship or a postdoc that's like 2,000 miles away from our community. Purpose and meaning can do a lot. It can draw us back to our why. It's done that for me many, many times. Every time I think about reducing clinical work, I'll get a note or a card or an email from a very grateful patient, and I'm just like, oh, well, how can I not keep doing this? So it's powerful, right? It's the birthplace of narrative medicine. It is the source of the PCBH stories that come out. And so for a lot of us, it's why we do what we do, but we can't just double down on purpose and meaning to sustain this work. And in fact, I think the more we try to double down on purpose and meaning or self-care strategies, the more we are actually playing into this larger parasitic relationship into the healthcare ecosystem. So for something to be truly sustainable, to be mutual, it has to be not just bottom up, which I think is purpose and meaning, but top down. It has to be about resourcing and creating a sense of being valued in the organization. So what makes people feel valued? How do you as an organization or a leader in an organization create a sense of people feeling valued? And when I think about this in terms of sustainability, it matters a little bit what's happening at the CEO level, but unless you're really value misaligned, what's happening at that very top level is actually going to be much less relevant to your day-to-day than what's happening within your microsystem, within your clinic or your department. And so for any of you who are mid-level leaders or leaders, like this is your work. Like, how do you really create a sense of people feeling valued? Because when we as helpers and people oriented to service work feel seen and heard and understood, when we trust that we're valued not just for what we do, but for who we are, like we individually and collectively are just rock stars. And we're gonna show up and we're gonna make a difference. So this question of like what really helps people feel valued is something I'm very interested in. And I feel exceptionally valued in my work. Partly is it's really cool to just be the boss, but also to have like an amazing partner here. So I recently had this ask of me to add something in, to cover for a teacher who went on unexpected medical leave. And I was debating about whether to do it. I didn't, should I really do it? What's the impact sort of for the work that we're doing? And so this is the response that I got back from my co-leader. She said, first off, I very much trust you to make the right decision about this for you. So I support you in doing this if it's important to you. I would ask you to do your own inquiry why it's important to you, and if part of that why is it fills your cup in some way, I'm definitely in support of it. So that was my response from Joan, and I got that response, and I showed it to my daughter, and I said, everybody should have a partner like this. Everybody should have a leader like this, right? Because that's the kind of response where I feel empowered, I feel like I can autonomously make that decision, and I feel really valued. It's not what we do a lot in healthcare, so this is where we want to sort of start the conversation with you all. And often I think it's important to start with how we don't feel valued. So we're going to try to do that through a little bit of a conversation with you all. So you can,
I don't know if my mic is on.
Do the instruction.
So we're going to try to use some technology. It may or may not work, but we're going to try. So I see you all know exactly what to do with a QR code. Beth, very good, very good. So everyone, get your phone out. And if you open up your camera, scan the QR code, and it's going to should take you to a screen that asks you this question. Do you feel valued by your organization? And what is happening in your organization that impacts you maybe directly or indirectly in which you do not feel valued? And we're going to have our tech partners in the back try to switch the screen over to actually show your results live. So when you answer that question, hopefully your results will show up here. And if not, we have some mics, and we'll just do some. What is it saying?
That's not the question. It's saying that makes you feel valued.
Oh, it's not the not. Huh.
Well, maybe we'll just go all analog and just use our mics that we have here. We have a couple mics up at the front, and maybe you can think about, or you might want to type your answer, and then we'd love to hear from you about what in your organization Now, okay, we're seeing the right question, but that's not the screen you're seeing.
You have what makes you feel valued? Okay.
Well, that's okay.
That's the next question. Well, maybe we can start here without.
Let's start here.
Yeah. So is anyone willing to come up to a mic, shout out? What makes you not feel valued in your organization?
Having the same conversation over and over and over again.
Okay.
Did you guys also hear that?
Having the same conversation over and over again.
We're doing it right now, aren't we?
Yeah, so not feeling heard, not being heard, because otherwise, why are you sort of having the same conversation? Yeah. What else?
Support for my ideas that ends when it requires effort, time, or money from anyone else.
So it's a great idea, just don't have us implement it. Okay. Yeah. Oh. So I don't know if everybody could hear that, essentially, that there's sort of selective invitations to certain tables and not being at tables that actually have a direct impact on your team.
If we can take this down just for a second while we're answering this question, then we'll come back to this question.
What else makes you not feel valued in your organization?
Being asked for feedback after a decision has already been made.
Being asked for feedback after a decision is already made. Tell us how great of a decision this is, please.
Feedback is welcome.
Right? What else? Pay inequity.
I think having really short timelines where it like assumes that whatever projects I already have on the plate are just have to get pushed for somebody else's timelines. Especially if there was an opportunity to do it sooner and not have a fire drill.
So that also sounds like it bleeds into autonomy, somebody else kind of directing the timeline and not trusting you. Yeah. Somebody else had a hand up. Yeah. More with less, which has been super common, especially the last couple of years, but also just common in healthcare. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yes, yes. When I was in the Air Force, we said that was voluntold. Yes. Yeah. What else? To work beyond what the capacity to actually get your basic needs met, and so you have to sacrifice something. Something has to give in order to work or do this job. Something has to give. Yeah, and we can all do that for a day or two a week, but to have a job where that's expected of you over time, yeah, is really not sustainable. Yeah. Anything else? We'll try to capture these.
Geez, I have like a list of probably 10 things that I could say, but this is your time, your space.
Yeah.
When you're asked to do something and you're promised certain things, but then when you agree to do it, those things are not there, but you still can't do it. And you can't change your commitment to it.
Oh, you've committed to do something that you're actually under-resourced to execute and do. So you're set up to fail, basically, from the start. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I've always been struck in oh, somebody else? Yeah.
Just being asked to do a project, getting everybody together to do the project, coming to a conclusion, offering it up to senior leaders, and then they say, well, we already figured that out.
Yeah. Or we'll continue to look into it for the next 6, 12, 18 months. Yeah, yeah. So you put a lot of work and effort into doing something that just sort of like gets, yeah, it's on the cutting room floor. Yep. So I've always been struck in asking people these questions and sort of learning this from the patients that I care for, that it's not always just the opposite of what makes you not feel valued versus what creates a sense of feeling valued, right? It's not just the absence or presence of those things that creates a sense of feeling valued. So I think because of the technology piece, maybe we can go, we actually had some responses to the valued one.
Yeah, so we can go back to that
We can
screen
go back,
that you were
yeah.
seeing all the responses.
Yeah,
scroll.
and so you guys can sort of see the responses here of what creates a sense of feeling valued, and we'll try to share these as well. So some recognition in terms of compensation, a lot of like being heard, being seen, appreciation, autonomy.
Listening.
So I don't know if you guys are getting the sense of this, but this is not uncommon for things I hear, and the ways that people will feel valued, they don't take huge, I mean, this is not policy level stuff at the healthcare system, at your organization system. This is like the basic human connection that people actually feel like, oh, you see that I show up, you see the work that I do, and it matters. Somebody's paying attention. Again, not just for what I do, but who I am. When we, this is beautiful, and it's not that hard. But when we're really tapped and we're really depleted as leaders or as just healthcare professionals in some way, it's really hard sometimes to extend ourselves in this way, or really to recollect, to remember that this is all it takes. And Joan's going to talk in a lot more detail about that.
So we can go back to the slides. Yes, thank you. So you can stand, you can go. I know you're here with me, right here. So I don't know if you all know, but we founded a company that what we do is we provide, we take care of healthcare professionals. So we provide psychotherapy and counseling to healthcare professionals all over the country. But before that, many moons ago, actually only 2 moons ago, we were actually, 2 years ago, lots of moons, 24 moons ago, we were actually in leadership positions in integrated care settings, doing all the work that you're doing now. So we still have a very strong affinity for this work, support this work, and now support the caregivers who are doing this work. And so in my past life, I was a director of a behavioral health program. We had 6 clinics, and I had a little over 30 people doing this work in all different kinds of positions: psychiatry, behavioral health provider, community health workers, resource specialists. And so what I'm going to speak to right now is from my experience in that role. And it was in an academic medical center where I had a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of constraints. So it was a very big system in which I kind of had to figure out, how do I make the work of my team sustainable in this ginormous system that has a ton of constraints and demands and rules. What I did and what I would want you to think about is, it's the little things that can make the biggest difference. When I met with my team, when I started to get to know a new hire, I started listening to what it was that, who they are outside of work and what their needs were as a human, as a parent, as a dog parent, as a rower, as someone who loves to take care of their roses, what they needed from me as their leader to be able to sustain the work and the human outside of the work, and then marry those two together. So I listened and I thought about, how can I marry the needs of the organization? I wasn't always successful in this, and the needs of the individual. And that came with thinking about schedules. What does a daily schedule look like? If I want someone to stay and do this work for 12 years, what can they do over time with their schedule? What can I do? How can we create a template? I thought about it when I was building workflows. How do I make this work sustainable? So most days, people can show up and want to do this work and feel equipped to do this work and keep doing this work. So actually thinking about the workflow. Okay, you could do this. If it's a sprint, it's not sustainable. Well, actually a sprint in quality improvement is a thing and it's pretty cool. But if it's a sprint, it's not sustainable. So it has to be what can you set up to run a marathon over and over again. So you can't use all of your energy all at once. Because if you do, then what happens? You can't finish the race if it's a marathon. So I thought about this when I was listening and reviewing vacation requests. And in fact, in my one-on-one meetings with everybody, which I had monthly, we talked about, what are you going to do with your vacation time? What are you going to do with your time off? That was just as important as, how is your workload? Do you need anything for your workstation? How are you doing with the new PCP that you're working with? How's the SBIRT screening going? The same importance went to, what are you doing outside of work? What are you doing after work? What are you doing with your PTO? When are you taking PTO? When was the last time you took PTO? That is the questions that we all need to be asking around, how do we make this work sustainable? Oh, you don't have the PTO that you need to be able to keep doing this work? That's a problem. That's my job with the rest of my leaders to kind of figure out, how do we actually advocate for more PTO to be able to do this work? So it was very big in our team. We shared about if we traveled or didn't travel, what we did in our time off, and that was restorative. And I took a friend's Gumby actually on a trip, and I took pictures of all the places that Gumby went, and everyone found it really fun, and I shared it with everybody on the team, and it was really fun. But also, this was just a public service announcement to drink more water too. So I want you to think about, when you're setting up a program, or if you're in a program or you're in a work setting, how you can think about these little pieces around sustainability. One of the things that policies that I kind of made up in my head, which actually became a thing, was no questions asked if someone told me they needed to go home. If someone came to me or anyone else in the leadership team and said, I need to go home, it was about creating space for them to go home. I care about what's going on with them as a person, but it's not like, well, could you just stay until after lunch? Because that person's going on break, no. You need to go home? Okay. You got a warm handoff right now? I'll take it. It's that servant leader stepping in. Okay, let me call the other person and see if they can kind of cover, or how can we make it possible for you to leave? I trusted my team that if they told me they needed to go home, they needed to go home. And I didn't ask any questions other than, are you okay? Do you need anything from me? But I get that's autonomy, okay? So things like that, little things like that. Another thing that I did was I would leave little gifts. They would be silly. You'll see I'm a kind of a silly kind of person. There'd be little gifts. I'd leave them in their mailbox or on their desk, little thank you cards, saying thank you for something they did, or if they took an extra warm handoff, or if they stayed late with a patient in the lobby who was decompensating, or if they helped a MA who was struggling with giving vaccines to a really upset child. We would see those things, and instead of just saying hey, thanks for doing that, we would honor that with, a $3 gift. It didn't have to be a big thing. So this idea of appreciation, thank you cards, notes. We had a monthly team meeting. We had a spot for shout outs and appreciations. And I gotta tell you, there was never a month that went by that there wasn't an opportunity for someone to say, hey, I wanna thank Jill. She really helped me out when I got 3 warm handoffs at the same time, and I didn't know what to do, and I was feeling really overwhelmed, and she actually went into the most complex room. So I wanna give Jill a thank you. So I think making spaces for these places of appreciation and where people feel valued. And then we started this culture where if you couldn't, because we were across 6 clinics, sometimes we couldn't like actually leave a gift or put a card. So we sent emails like this. Hey, great presentation. You're a good teacher. That email made my day. I did a silly thing on a whiteboard and I thought it was crazy. And then she said, I actually learned something about nutrition and diabetes. So little things like this. This was we had a clinician leave. We actually got a custom cake for her. She always wore this necklace and she had this like blue shirt that was very her. And we made this beautiful cake. Well, we didn't, we hired someone to do that. But something she felt known. We opened that cake box and she felt like we knew her. We did. And we kind of showed that through the cake. And just little notes like, hey, you're amazing, or hey, I see you. And that kind of, we don't do a lot of like hugging or touching sometimes, especially during COVID, but there was an opportunity to give that little touch of like, I see you, right? So the other thing I did was make it okay to go home sick. People in medicine, this isn't a secret, they come to work sick. We know this. Less so during COVID, I think, because we were all very fearful of what that might mean. But before COVID, absolutely, absolutely. And so we made sure that we were working on our PTO policy so everyone felt like they had enough sick time, because a lot of the answers that I got was, I have 2 little kids and they're sick all the time, so I really need to save my sick time for when my kids are sick. Well, you're not well, whatever that meant for them, and would like you to go home, and we are going to create more sick time. That was like one of my stakes in the ground before I left, that everyone had enough PTO, because if you are not well, you should not be coming to work. And there was a lot of conversation about that, but it was that same kind of policy of like, hey, something's going on. Are you feeling okay? No, I'm a little off, but no, I was thinking about not coming in. No. Go home. It's okay. So go home to some place like this where you can rest. I don't know any clinic that looks like this, so clinics are not restful places necessarily. Sometimes you can go in an exam room and turn off the light and maybe sit on the exam table and take a breath, but you need to be in a restorative place. You need to be with your loved ones on a couch with some tea, and you need to take a break, and that's how our bodies restore. So kind of going back to this idea of sustainability. What is sustainability? It is about not depleting our resources. Over these last 2+ years, we have depleted our resources. And I don't know anyone who would say, actually, no, I have a ton of resources. Woo! We have depleted our resources. And when we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about needing to restore, needing to replete, and needing to rest when we start to kind of see those resources dwindle and be able to take the time to restore and the time to replete. And sometimes it doesn't take a lot of time, but it's how does that happen for you? So for some of us, this is what we need. We need a couple of these, we need a couple of pets, we need some licks, we need to go take a walk. And so we all have ways of repleting and restoring and resting. And we all have ways of doing that internally. That might be practicing self-compassion, that might be taking a moment for a meditation, or externally, where we go to people that help us restore, places that help us restore, or things or activities that help us restore. So I really want you to think about who are your people, where are your places, and what are the things you like to do that actually restore and replete your resources. We are not a bottomless pit of anything. We have a limited amount of energy, compassion, and love. We can't just keep giving. And so you have to think about, what are these things for me? And what I want you to do is go back wherever you came from, go back to your team and ask this question to your team. Have them write it down. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's turning inward. Maybe it's being in a quiet place. Maybe it's nature. Maybe it's this. Cooking is one of my biggest ways of restoring and being creative. You don't think of it as like creative. I'm not like a drawer. I don't like, really not very good drawer or painter, but I love to cook, and it's my way of restoring, even after like the hardest, longest day. Thing is, it does take a lot of time, but maybe it's this. Maybe it's you love hanging out with your Gumby. Maybe it's fixing things. Who likes to fix things? Like maybe it's tinkering. Maybe that's restorative to you. Maybe it's hiking. Maybe it's running. Maybe it's walking around a river or walking around the city. Or maybe it's finding a quiet space in nature to forest bathe. But whatever it is, know it, own it, write it down, spread the word that everyone has these things, and start to think about this as an absolutely necessary part of the work. And start asking people, what do you do to restore and replete your resources and your energy? And then start supporting. I mean, you probably already do support it, but start really thinking about how you can support that. Sometimes it's with people and friends, like my friends. And sometimes it's we need to be alone. So we're gonna kind of shift to move to this idea of we are social beings, and we must feel safe, and we must feel like we belong to feel safe. And I want you to think about where you work, the families you're part of, the groups you're part of. Maybe it's CFHA, maybe it's the people sitting at your table right now. But I want you to think about what helps you feel safe and what helps you feel like you belong at work. Because when we feel safe and we belong, our nervous systems are regulated and we can actually sustain longer. So we'll see if our technology works this time. There you go. You're just here for support. Come on up to the stage, my friend. When it's okay to not be okay. Yes. What? This is a test?
This is a test.
Feeling seen and heard, yeah. Authenticity, personalized acknowledgments. Laughter in moderation, yes, very good, very good.
Not being the only one who looks like me.
Will you turn Tina's mic on too? She has good things to say.
Okay. I'm just reading. They all have good things to say. I think taking this in. Can you guys see? Okay, yeah. I think
Does anyone want to say anything about anything that they've written or something else? Does this resonate with you?
There's so much emphasis, particularly in the space of trauma-informed care. How many of you have trained a lot of your clinicians to provide trauma-informed care? Yeah, a lot of clinics are really working hard to provide trauma-informed care to their patients. How many of you feel like you work in an organization that pays attention to the trauma that's endemic to your work as a healthcare professional, and that you are in a trauma-informed organization that has that same perspective for the healthcare professionals? Anyone? A couple people working on it, maybe? Yeah? And what did you guys do in your work setting? I'm curious. Oh, I called you out. No. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So that's a perspective that I think is really common, is we're going to all do trauma-informed care, and we're going to do this so we can care for our patients. Meanwhile, the space in the clinic or the department in the hospital or the floor is just seething with all sorts of ways in which the individuals are not safe. There's not space for pausing. There's not adequate sort of water or other kinds of resources that are needed. People don't feel physically safe or feel like they have to keep pushing even in the face of sometimes really objective threats from patients. So that's not trauma-informed in that way.
You want to go to the next question?
Yeah, I think go to the next one.
So can you switch it to the, oh no, not, go back. Then there's a little, yeah. Yeah. So does that switch your guys' screen on your phone? Or is there a place for you to go to answer this question? And if not, then we'll just go analog.
So sometimes when we're thinking about kind of what makes the work sustainable, we don't think we can get there from here. In terms of the changes are too drastic, they're too big, there's so many sort of forces that are working against it. And to be honest, there are a lot of perverse incentives in healthcare that sustain the things as they are, and there will continue to be, including how we fund healthcare. But to think about this in a way that's sort of a little bit dreamy, maybe, like, is there anything that could make your work more sustainable? And is there anything that you can do, no matter how small it is, starting now, that would support that could make your work more sustainable? Because just in the way, like, feeling valued is very personal, how you individually feel valued, what would make your work more sustainable is actually also pretty personal. So this one's not working.
I guess it's not working.
Yeah, so we would appreciate any, sort of call outs, any ideas about what would make your work more sustainable. We're here to have this conversation with you because we shared a couple of ideas, but we don't pretend to have all the answers. Yeah.
So for me, a few things come to mind. One is the idea of...
Do you mind coming up to the mic just so everyone can hear you? Thanks, Kent.
So a few ideas come to mind for me. One is sort of like that serenity prayer. So what can I change and what can't I change? And let's focus on what I can change or what I can effect change within. So that's my actions, my behaviors. Then there's a whole other set of things around the people in an organization who hold the power and how they create climate or culture that either engenders safety or thwarts it by hoarding power or hoarding information, which helps them maintain power.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, outside of any sort of like specific religious connotation, I actually really find the Serenity Prayer so helpful because it helps to sort of put things in these probably somewhat artificial dichotomous buckets, but that can be helpful when you're thinking about where do I direct my limited resources and energy, and are there things that actually are mutable that I could begin to start to have some effect over. And I also think kind of starting really small, starting in your space, even if there's some things happening sort of 3, 5, 7 levels up, that you may not be able to affect change for because of that power. But when we can start to make small changes, it's a very virtuous cycle, and we start to feel more and more empowered in making those small changes. Yeah, Julie, please.
Real intentional effort and strategy to reduce power differentials throughout the organization. And the way that I have some hope about this is through relational leadership as a strategy that I've learned over the last couple of years. We don't have to work in this way where people are power over. We can work and intentionally develop skill to work with each other to be power with. And power with is an amazing place to be. It's inspirational, it's sustaining, it's the kind of way that I think most people want to be. So, yeah, relational leadership.
Hashtag relational leadership. Yeah, I mean, I think that the leadership piece and the leadership in healthcare in particular, and that often we have clinicians who become leaders and then I think forget, you know, and so that's always something I'm interested in is what have you forgotten as you've become a leader? What have you forgotten? And these changes can really only happen, I think, at the speed of trust in in the system, right? You have to be able to cultivate trust to be able to make those changes. No, please, your voice is more more important than mine.
No, not true. Yeah, just thinking about especially career sustainability. I've told prospective employers and turned jobs down. I will give you 40 of the best hours that you're going to get. If you're asking for more than that, I am not your guy, because I'm going to go home at 5, because the things that happen in my life outside of those 40 hours are just as important, if not more important to me than what happens here. I will give you those 40 and they will be dynamic and awesome. After that, those are mine. And I pretty much keep to that. And when jobs start to press that, I've changed jobs, I've turned them down, because that's my time. And that's how I remain sustainable and enthusiastic, because I still want to go to work. I don't dread going to work. I like going to work because I know I can go home on time to my family and to my kids and to my activities.
Thank you. I hear two really important things in that in terms of making work sustainable. One is self-awareness, right? So that's very true for you, and that may not be true for everybody. For some people it may be 30, for other people it may be 60, for some people it may not be a finite number of hours as much as other sorts of whatever is important to you. So knowing your own values in that way, in terms of self-awareness, I think can really help service work be more sustainable. And the other thing I'm hearing is boundaries. And setting boundaries, and particularly what comes up for us as clinicians to set a boundary, and all of the ancillary guilt and concern and all those things that come up when we set a boundary. So thank you for naming both of those as two things that can really help with sustainability: self-awareness and setting boundaries.
And I think as leaders, when you're leading a team or you're part of a leadership team, part of our responsibility too is to ask the question of, to this specific point, what is a sustainable schedule? How many hours in the clinic is actually sustainable? Because I think there's two things, one of which is how many days is sustainable? How do you want to break up your 40 plus, maybe less than 40, I personally think is actually sustainable. I think that we need to be looking between like 30 and 32 hours really as full-time, but that I'll take that up with like the entire cultural, societal, you know, the Americans that we like to work. So, we'll talk after that. But I really actually advocated when I was in my directorship role to create a full-time was 4 9-hour days. And then if people wanted to go all the way to 1.0, we created another half day at home, and that was their admin time. But there were two tenets to my leadership around scheduling. It was 5 days in the clinic was too much. This is my personal thing. Because what I saw was they needed more time at home or more time out of the clinic to restore, to be able to come back and be in the clinic and be fully present and be ready to do this work, because the work is really intense. And the other thing was dedicated admin time. That everybody who's doing any kind of clinical work needs dedicated admin time. And if your clinicians don't have that, I wouldn't expect them to keep up on all of the documentation, all of the watch this module for your,
well-being.
Yeah, all the well-being modules you now have to watch, right? Like dedicated admin time. So I also challenge you to think about is 40 hours really sustainable full-time position for anyone doing integrated behavioral health, and how much admin time, they need some, but how much admin time is appropriate for each role you have working in your clinic. Soapbox, I'll get off the soapbox.
I have a, whenever you are.
Yes.
I think aspects of cultural competency, cultural humility from management is energy sustaining, and to see those efforts permeated through the organization would also give energy and life to work. And one of the things that I also would like to add is advocacy within the community. That's an important aspect too of sustaining that energy and light and life and work.
Thank you.
And I think in particular, cultural competency, cultural humility, those pieces, it's not something you can watch on a module. It's not something that you can just take a training in. It's a practice. There are certain tenets that maybe you can learn through a class or a module, but it's a practice. And we need some people in the organization to be able to lead that practice. And people are going to learn by watching and having feedback about their own leadership or interactions. So I think it's dynamic, and it needs to be happening on all levels and not just a check the box. I think we've all seen that the big piece of the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, has been a lot of checking the box in that area. And this is actually like a practice that has to happen, and it's happening in every interaction. No one said a pool, no one said like a personal chef, no one wants like 2 screens. How about 2 monitors? I guess everyone has that now. Corporate nap, yes, like Spanish siesta. Yes, I am all with it. We should talk later.
So I'm going to speak about context. I'm coming from a rural context, and I know it's not that different from larger cities, but in the experience that I'm having, there's a huge upsurge in mental health crisis and severe mental illness, and a lack of providers outside of the context of integrated health. And a lot of times what would be very helpful and sustaining is a responsivity by leadership to this need, and not just saying, oh, we'll hope that there'll be more providers in the community. There needs to be an action that is taken by the community and by the healthcare system.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to a lot of the moral suffering, really, that many of us have experienced the last couple of years with the lack of resources, and probably as integrated care clinicians, sort of identifying and being in this space of rapid access and rapid identification, and then nowhere to help people get access to the services that they need, because everybody is, there's long wait lists, everybody's full. So I think that's a bit of what you're pointing to, is sort of how heavy that is to see the suffering, right? You don't have any plausible deniability kind of from your private practice office or something that it's out there. Like, it's right here, and you can't facilitate people getting access to the care that would really make a difference for them in the timely way that it would. And I think there is a heaviness that we've all sort of carried through the last couple of years because of that.
And I have a little bit of a different thought on that, which is, and this is not like a political statement at all, but I think we need to make becoming a mental health care professional more accessible. And actually, I think that means we have to make it less expensive. It just needs to be less expensive to go to school, to learn how to do this work, and that's what's going to make it more accessible. And again, not a political statement, but really thinking about how do you how are we going to grow a workforce? The only way we're going to really grow the workforce, which we know we already need, is to make training more accessible. How do you make training more accessible? Well, it needs to be in the communities. It needs to be in more communities and in more parts of the country where but we have a lot of training programs. We just need to make it less, that's one of many things, but definitely making it less expensive. So, not going to solve that problem today, but. Want to move?
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'll see on your table, there are some lovely cards, lovely green cards, and there's a couple questions. And we just want you to take a moment to reflect on these two questions. You can answer, I would encourage you to answer the what am I learning or what am I doing well first. I don't know if you want to set this up more.
Well, yeah, maybe I do. Just in the space of making things sustainable, we have, a very natural inclination to go to the things that are frustrating us, the things that are hard for us, the things that we want to complain about, the things that aren't going well. And there's a lot of reasons for that, sort of neurobiologically, but we often don't do what we do a lot with our patients, which is turn towards their strengths and amplify their strengths, and to try to be very intentional about saying, even though this is really hard, let me also give voice to the things that I'm doing well. Let me also give voice to what I'm learning and discovering about my work, about my passions, about myself in relationship to my work. So it's just making some intentional space to actually give a little bit of fuel to that part of you too.
They can take any extra card.
And you may have already flipped the card over, but the other question is really, what can I let go of? Talked with a lot of clinicians across all different specialties these last few years, and we're all holding something. We're all holding something of what we didn't do or didn't get done, the small ways that maybe we need to forgive ourselves or forgive others. So there's something maybe top of mind, top of heart of what can I let go of just for today? Just lay down that burden just a little bit. And these are for you, you're not turning them in. And there's probably extras on the table because a lot of people have left the conference, so you can certainly take any extra cards if this might be an activity you want to do with your teams, or if you just want to repeat it for yourself over time. Yeah. And we have just a couple minutes if anybody wants to be brave and share in any one of these. Anyone willing to put their voice in the group?
I'll share what I'm doing well.
Nice.
Speaking my truth, advocating for others, and protecting my peace.
Thank you. Lovely. Speaking my truth, advocating for others, and protecting my peace.
What I'm learning and doing well is helping people find hope, and what I'm willing to, I want to let go of, even just for today, are my imperfections.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you for putting hope into this space too. There's a proverb that says something around happiness is having someone to love, something to do, and something to hope for. And then there were chickens. Anyone else want to share? What are you learning? What do you want to let go of? Thank you for participating in this sort of collective wisdom gathering around what makes this work sustainable. There's no concrete, finite set of list of things. I don't think there ever will be, because this work is dynamic, it's ever changing. And so we also have to be dynamic and change with it in terms of what is going to sustain us so that we can continue to be of service and hopefully be continually found in being of service.
So when we were creating our founding documents together, one of the things that we thought of as being one of the most important pieces of our work together is laughter and humor. And this was something I brought to my team and bring to our team. And I can make a lot of funny analogies about the chickens, but in reality, who doesn't love a rubber chicken? And actually, it became the parting gift. If anyone actually left my team, we'd give them something personal, and then they'd get a rubber chicken. Why? I don't know, because it's just funny. So I couldn't get 100 of these ginormous rubber chickens. So we have the flying rubber chicken for everyone to use today, but also bring back to your team and to think of it as a symbolic token of how you can incorporate playfulness and fun and humor. And that is also part of what sustains us. We need to be able to laugh. Laughter is one of the ways we complete the stress response. It's actually part of us. Okay, so unwrap your chicken.
I was so
These
good
are
at
very,
it earlier.
very important instructions, and I'm going to try to say it deadpan like Sandy would. I want you to unwrap the chicken.
I'm kind of a good shot, actually, surprisingly.
I want you to place the head. Oh, you can demonstrate. Place the head over your finger. Put the chick down with the other hand. Yep, down, down. Yep, there you go. Yes. And then aim. Try not to hurt anybody. Release the body while keeping. Yes, they go very far. Very good. Very good.
See, I'm a good shot. I'm a good shot. I know.
So, just want you to think about this question of how do you bring playfulness into your work? You don't have to answer the question, but just think about it. And we have a song that we're going to play for you as we transition before Naftali talks about how great this conference was, how great Boise was. So we're going to have our IT people put on the song for you, a little video that will help solidify this talk.